Christ of Nazareth. He is God, created you, created me.
It's Jesus! He is the Messiah.
History isn't just written, it's sculpted, and to preserve the history of Jesus' appearance, figurines and sculptures have been made, but all of that has just changed.
You know, if Jesus is saving people, I mean, I wouldn't stand in his way.
Elon Musk's bold claim that Jesus is black, with proof provided, has shattered centuries of tradition. Think about it. Could the face you've been taught to revere be a total lie? What is Elon Musk's proof, and why was Jesus' image rewritten? Join us as we look into Elon Musk's proof that Jesus is black. Elon Musk's proof that Jesus is black. Elon Musk seems to constantly be making headlines by offering his own take on Jesus' teachings, adding an Old Testament twist. He claims Jesus was black, and he says he has proof to back it up. He points to the book of Daniel, where it describes the hair of the one to come, Jesus, as being like pure wool. Some say this means his hair was kinky. Then in the book of Revelation, it says Jesus' feet were like burnished bronze, which suggests he had brown skin. Joan Taylor, the author of What Did Jesus Look Like?, agrees, saying Jesus probably looked like modern-day Iraqis with dark brown hair and olive skin. So according to her, Jesus was likely a typical black man, not the blonde-haired, blue-eyed surfer dude we often see. But it raises some big questions. Was this misrepresentation on purpose? When did his image change? What you're about to hear might just change everything you thought you knew. Now there's a growing call for the black race to rise and reclaim what's rightfully theirs. History has often downplayed the contributions of black people to humanity and ignored the ancient power of the black race. The Bible doesn't directly say what Jesus' race or skin color was, but it leaves enough clues about his physical features. For example, we already mentioned Revelation chapter 1, verse 16, which says his feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. If you're not familiar, bronze is brown, and when it's heated up, it turns an even darker brown. Some might argue that the Arabic, Middle Eastern people of Egypt today, living in a hot desert climate with temperatures reaching 44 degrees Celsius in July and August, are also brown, but they're just tan and their skin tone doesn't match the color of burnished bronze. But if Jesus was of Middle Eastern origin, his feet should be described as ivory, an off-white color, or something similar to a typical Middle Easterner's complexion. People of African descent are known to become darker with prolonged sun exposure due to the natural production of melanin, so Jesus, like other African-descended people, had to have been at least brown-skinned. To dig deeper, let's look at another Bible verse. Revelation chapter 1, verses 13 to 14, which says, "And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. Only black people's hair, when grown, resembles wool. The hair of Asians and Europeans is typically long, flowy, and wavy. Yet the image of Jesus we see worldwide shows him with blonde hair, though the Bible says his hair was white in color, wavy and long, while the Bible says it was woolly in texture. The interesting thing about finding proof in the Bible is that answers are often hidden in plain sight, right there for ages, but not many readers notice. In Daniel 10 verses 5 to 6, Daniel describes a vision of Jesus saying, "I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude." In this verse, not only are Jesus' feet described as bronze-like in color, but his arms and legs as well. The legs are the lower part of the body, from the hip to the feet, and the arms are the upper limbs, from the shoulder to the hands. This verse describes both his arms and legs as burnished bronze, and we all know that the arms and legs of any person are the same color as the rest of the body, which indicates Jesus was a black man. Not just once, but multiple times in the Bible, his feet are described as brown or bronze colored by different biblical figures. Another clue is found in Genesis 49 verses 10 to 12, which is part of the early biblical verses that foretell the birth of Christ. The passage mentions that the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until tribute comes to him, and that he will receive the obedience of the people. It also describes him binding his foal to the vine and washing his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. The most notable part is that his eyes are described as darker than wine. While dark eyes are common to all races, this description challenges the image of a blue-eyed Jesus that has been widely accepted for hundreds of years. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14 also states that nature itself teaches that long hair is disgraceful for a man. This verse points out that long hair was seen as unnatural for the ancient Hebrews, and that any attempts to make their hair longer artificially were considered going against the natural woolly texture of their hair. What's even more fascinating is that the Bible never gives any indication of Jesus having Caucasoid or European features. The portrayal of Jesus and the ancient Hebrews as white started becoming common during the Renaissance period, from the 14th to the 17th centuries, when artists began depicting biblical scenes with white figures. Unfortunately, this image has persisted since then. Based on the evidence from the Bible, it's much more accurate to say that Jesus Christ was black rather than attributing him to any other race. There's more. Historical evidence and icons of Jesus' blackness. The history of black Jesus icons actually dates back to the 14th century, and they have been preserved over time. These icons depict predominantly black figures, marking a major departure from the usual European images of Jesus and his followers. Museums have played an important role in keeping these artworks alive. The oldest known image of Christ, discovered in Syria around 235 after the death of Christ, shows him with short woolly hair and dark skin. This contrasts with the widely accepted Western depiction of Jesus as a fair-skinned man with wavy brown or blonde hair and blue eyes. The Bible's world existed before color prejudice, where black people were shown great respect. Jesus, though representing all races, had to belong to one race. What historical facts suggest that Jesus was black? This is where things become even more fascinating. It is a multicultural world. But one of the great tragedies over the past 400 years has been the creation of white supremacy by Europeans and white Americans. In doing so, they took control of images. During a visit to the Solovetsky Monastery, sacred and secular images of them were shown as victorious and positive, turning them white and casting black into a negative light. A black Jesus icon from the 16th century was presented to Vladimir Putin. This sparked his interest in these unique religious artifacts, leading to more efforts to preserve and promote them in Russia. Putin has strongly supported the preservation and recognition of black Jesus icons. His efforts have helped restore these icons and bring them into public awareness, showing their significance to Russia's cultural and religious heritage. It was only when we learned how to peel back the dark layers beneath the surface that the true beauty emerged, and it made them more visible and appreciated, even surprising Andrei Matus, who was in Moscow at the time. He once said that to understand the historical context of black Jesus icons, artists should come to Moscow to learn, not in Italy. We need to step back in time and explore early Christian art and aniconism during the first centuries of Christianity. Aniconism, the rejection of religious images, had a significant influence on Christian art. In the attempt to explain how black African Jesus became the blonde, blue-eyed, pale-skinned image used for white supremacy, some believe that Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion at the Council of Nicaea in 325 after the death of Christ, and launched a campaign to erase all black images of Jesus. Before Constantine, Christians of all races had already established the faith. Figures like Simon of Cyrene, Simeon called Niger, Rufus, Alexander, and John Dorada, the Ethiopian eunuch whose icon is displayed in a Russian Orthodox church in Michigan, are found in the Bible. Saints and martyrs like Perpetua and Felicity, Mary of Egypt, Anthony the Great, and Cyprian of Carthage were revered. For Constantine to rule a multiracial empire, listen to a Christological debate between two black men, and yet decide that their holy images were forbidden doesn't seem like a legitimate belief. Black images of Christ, Mary, and the saints aren't anything new or rare in the Orthodox Church. The Copts in Egypt and the Ethiopians definitely had them. Even Greeks, Slavs, and Italians had these images in their churches, right alongside their most cherished icons. But when Muslims conquered the Byzantine East, the African Christian world got cut off from their European counterparts. So Eastern Europeans and Catholics started painting biblical characters to look like themselves. But here's the thing, this wasn't about racial supremacy until the transatlantic slave trade started in the 15th century, well after Emperor Constantine was out of the picture. When radical reformers broke away from the Roman Catholics, they made a point of destroying icons, and this included wiping out any non-European-looking images of Christ, Mary, and the saints. In the United States, which was pretty iconoclastic and Protestant, ancient black images of Christ weren't exactly going to fly in a slave-holding, segregationist society, but Eastern Orthodox immigrants held on to some of these images and even painted them in their churches, like the image of Saint Moses from the Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville, New York. But let's be real. Orthodox Christians were a tiny portion of the immigrant population in America, and their communities didn't mix much with the wider culture. So blaming Constantine for this just doesn't make sense. But black images of Christ and the saints didn't disappear completely. In fact, they stuck around in some Roman Catholic circles and were even more prominent in the Orthodox Church. If you step into most of these churches, you'll see full-sized icons of Mary and Jesus with shades of brown skin, looking like Drake or Lawrence Fishburne. Sure, their hair might be long and brown, but these icons are a world away from what one Russian Orthodox priest calls the truck stop Jesus. The first encounter with orthodoxy at St. Cyprian of Carthage in Richmond, Virginia, revealed Christ and his mother darker than light-skinned people nearby. The icons of St. Cyprian and Moses seemed like they could be paintings of a father and son. The icon of Mary and child Jesus at Holy Cross Monastery in Wayne, West Virginia, features a very dark Mary and Jesus. During the Lenten fast, the icon of Mary of Egypt is venerated by all. Outside of Eastern Orthodoxy, the Copts and Ethiopians have plenty of these black images of Jesus and the saints that Constantine supposedly destroyed. Instead of keeping the myth alive that Constantine whitewashed Christianity, African Americans should visit Coptic and Ethiopian churches to see for themselves that the Orthodox faith has never lost its African roots. Visiting Eastern churches like the Antiochians, Greeks, Russians, and others also reveals icons of saints of all colors and races. The Orthodox Church may not be perfect when it comes to race, but there's no need to invent stories to make a point. The implications of the appropriation of Jesus' race. The way Jesus' image was taken and changed is one of the biggest intellectual thefts in history. It started around the 4th century AD, when Christians began painting Jesus to look like Greek and Roman gods to attract more followers. It was basically marketing, but it had a huge negative impact. The second greatest trick of white supremacy was making us believe that the man of the century looked like a perfect, blonde-haired, blue-eyed model, not a real original soul brother. The first trick was making us think we were inferior when we're definitely not, but that's not the point here. This change in how Jesus looked is important because imagery matters. When people see others who look like them in powerful or beautiful positions, they feel like they too can reach those heights. It's affirming, but living in a world where millions of Christians worship a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus only lifts blonde hair and blue eyes up higher, making whiteness seem more important. But the truth is clear, that image is a lie. Jesus was black. Now let's face the elephant in the room. How did this appropriation happen, and what are its real consequences? Let's get in. While Jesus transcends race and skin color, the image of a white Jesus has real-world consequences. If you close your eyes and picture Jesus, chances are you'll imagine a white man. Without even realizing it, many have become followers of this white Jesus. Not only is this image wrong, but it also stops us from honoring the image of God in people who aren't white. Jesus likely had a darker skin tone, more like the olive skin that's common among Middle Easterners today. Biblical scholar James Charlesworth even says Jesus was probably dark brown and suntan. The first depictions of Jesus showed him with a brown complexion and an oriental cast. But by the 6th century, Byzantine artists started showing him with white skin, a beard, and hair parted in the middle. And this is the image that became the standard. During the colonial period, Western Europe spread its image of a white Jesus across the world. This version of Jesus shaped how many Christians understood his ministry and mission. In the 19th century, some Christians who wanted to justify slavery went out of their way to present Jesus as white. By ignoring his true identity as a dark-skinned, oppressed minority, slaveholders found it easier to justify the master-slave system and forget Jesus' mission to set the oppressed free, as seen in Luke chapter 4, verse 18. Now, some may argue that Jesus was neither black nor white because he was a Jew, but that argument is not true. As a Jew, Jesus was an ethnic minority in the Roman Empire. Jews were often marginalized by Romans, Greeks, and other groups in many cities under imperial rule. As a baby, Jesus became a target of ruler-sanctioned infanticide, fled to Egypt as a refugee, and experienced the exploitation of Roman tax collectors. Throughout his life, Jesus understood the struggles of belonging to an ethnic group whose culture, religion, and experiences were sidelined by those in power. Because Jesus was part of an ethnic minority, it challenges everyone to rethink who he really was and with whom he connected during his mission. When marginalized people gathered, Jesus was right there, not just because he helped them, but because he was one of them. Jesus didn't just care for victims of Roman violence. He was a victim of it. He didn't just care for refugees, he was a refugee. He didn't just care for the poor, he was poor. To Jesus, his ministry was deeply personal because he experienced the pain of being one of society's most marginalized people. Even more than how Jesus looked, it is clear from how he lived and died that he was a brother. He was not part of the dominant group. He was a revolutionary born into poverty and shut out from certain spaces. He spent his life on the run. As a child, he had to flee his home country to avoid being killed by the king. He faced constant oppression, with authorities spying on him and chasing after him. Despite all that, he still found time to share wisdom and enjoy wine with his friends. His story takes a turn when he is betrayed. He gets wrongfully arrested, and in front of a crowd, he is lynched. That sounds exactly like the life of a brother. The oppression he faced, the mistreatment by a government so afraid of him that it put him to death, all of it paints him as an outsider. Jesus' story mirrors the Black experience, where the system oppresses and destroys those who try to change the world. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, and many others. When someone speaks out, the system tries to silence them. But just like those tragically lost in their communities, Jesus ended up with the ultimate mural, his image painted across the world. And yet, despite living that Black life, Jesus is now presented as the face of white supremacy. Imagery is important, so if you are a Christian and want to display an image of Jesus in your home, choose a Black Jesus. Everyone deserves to see Jesus as the beautiful Black man he was. He was a true revolutionary who rose from nothing to become brilliant, powerful, loved, feared, and ultimately unforgettable. One of the greatest people ever, a man who showed the world how to live right, would not support theft. Yet when Christian leaders promote that surfer dude image of Jesus, they are pushing dishonesty, stolen imagery, and the continuation of white supremacy. That false image does not belong in your home. What do you think about Jesus being Black? Who do you think is to blame for the misrepresentation of Jesus' race? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.